Hey, boys and girls. I figured before we move on to the next topic, we needed to, have some closure or a summary of this greenhouse effect, global warming, and climate change. So, first of all, the greenhouse effect. Let's start there. I really want you to, understand that we love the greenhouse effect. The greenhouse effect is not a bad thing. Now, naturally, that is the way the greenhouse effect has been happening for the history of the Earth has been a good thing. Remember, we have a blanket or a bubble around our planet of these greenhouse gases that keep the earth warm. Okay, we want that blanket. The natural way it's always been happening is a good thing. If we didn't have the greenhouse effect, our planet would drop about 60 degrees and be way too cold to live. So, again, you're probably sick of me saying this, but the greenhouse effect, the way it's supposed to naturally work, is a good thing. We want that. Unfortunately, recently, the last 50 to 100 years, the greenhouse effect has gotten out of control. And that is not a natural thing. Okay. As a matter of fact, only 5% of it is probably natural. The other 95% of the greenhouse effect getting out of control is human driven, or it's caused by humans. And what we're doing is we're just adding way too many greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. So when you add more greenhouse gases, mainly carbon dioxide, that's the big one that we're adding. You add more layers to the blanket, and that will cause the planet to get warmer. So if we take a look, remember CO2 is the biggie. Okay, we looked at this graph. We looked at it a couple times, but we can see that recently, the last 50 years, maybe a little bit more than that, 50 to 100, the pattern's broken. Okay, throughout history, CO2 has gone up and down through hundreds of thousands of years, and things have been great. The natural greenhouse effect has remained the way it was. Recently, CO2 is just skyrocketing. Okay, it's out of control. We're adding way too much, and that's mostly from humans, 95%. Now, that's the burning of fossil fuels, gas, oil, petroleum, coal, natural gas. We burn a lot of them. Okay, factories, industries, electricity, cars, you can keep going. We burn a lot of fossil fuels. Not only that, we take down and clear the land. We take trees away. That is called deforestation, fancy word for taking away the forest, taking away the trees. The trees absorb carbon dioxide. Okay, if we get rid of the trees, there's nothing that can absorb them anymore, and the levels continue to go up. So not only do we take the trees away that produce oxygen, we also take away the sponges. Now, not only do trees absorb carbon dioxide, the oceans do as well. We call the oceans the sinks because they absorb the CO2 as well, but they can't absorb too much. And unfortunately, they have been absorbing a lot more than they should have, which we'll talk about in a bit. So CO2 is out of control. And this is not even including the other gases which are out of control as well, like methane, nitrous oxide, but CO2 is the biggie. We talked about, okay, there is a number of what we are currently looking at, parts per million. And on the screen here, this is where we're at. We are currently, as of today, at 415 parts per million. Okay, this is as high as it's ever been in, I think, 600 and some thousand years. Okay, usually the Earth has been below 300. Okay, and we've gone up and down, but below 300. So currently we're above 400 and we're just rising. It's not going down at all. So keep in mind, it's always been less than 300. Okay, so we're greater than 400. So if we keep adding gases, the blanket keeps increasing. Okay, we keep getting more and more of a blanket and the earth gets warmer. So our global temperature has been rising. Okay, now it might not seem like a lot. It's only 2 degrees, big deal, but it is a lot. Okay, it's really throwing the earth off. And that's been since 1880. We've gone up 2 degrees. The last 20 years or so have been the hottest years on record for the planet. Okay, so temperature's going up. If we keep having the temperature go up, it's not just the atmosphere that's getting warmer. We also have the oceans, especially the upper parts of the ocean that the sunlight hits. they're increasing as well. And the ocean has actually gone up zero point 0.6 degrees Fahrenheit, a little over a half of a degree for the ocean since 1969. Doesn't seem like a lot, just half of a degree, but it really is. Since the atmosphere is getting warmer, since the oceans are getting warmer, we have a lot of ice. If it's getting warmer, the ice is going to melt and we're going to lose ice. So if we look at two pieces of data, this is the Arctic ice minimum. Fancy. It's basically when it gets warmer out, we have a minimum amount of ice on the planet year after year. After all the melting happens, we have a certain amount of ice that remains. The ice minimum has been going down 13.1% per decade. So basically, ice is going down. We're losing it. Ice sheets, we're losing 428 billion metric tons a year. Every year, we're losing ice. Ice turns to water if it melts. It doesn't just disappear. And that will cause the ocean levels to go up. Okay, you have to put that ice somewhere, so the oceans are rising. And if we take a look, we've actually are getting a 3.3 millimeter ocean rise a year. Okay, 3.3. You keep adding this up year after year, it turns into quite a bit. As a matter of fact, I believe it's 8 inches in the last 100 years. So our oceans have risen 2/3 of a foot, 8 inches in the last 100 years. That's a big deal. So if we put all of this together, there's a lot of information, but basically the natural way the Earth has been working, it's a system. There's lots of parts. These are all the parts. It's not working the way it should be, but the parts are out of whack. Okay, we're getting warmer, we're losing ice, the oceans are getting warmer as well, and it kind of throws everything off. And that's where you get the word climate change. Climates are changing, things are different. We have more extreme weather in places, stronger hurricanes. Some places are getting warmer, some places are getting a little bit colder. We have droughts, we have wildfires. There's just so much that goes into this. But it's not changing for the better, it's changing for the worse. And humans are driving this change for the most part. So are there ways we can reverse it? Absolutely, but we have to change the way that we live. We can't keep adding that CO2 and those greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, and eventually the Earth can hopefully rebound and come back from these changes. But we have to, as an Earth as a whole, make these changes. Are we going in the right direction? We're getting there, but there's still a lot more to do. Now, one last thing. We talked about how the oceans are like sinks. They absorb the carbon dioxide as well, and we like that, but they're absorbing way too much. So they're helping us out, but they're absorbing more than they should be. So the oceans, unfortunately, since they're absorbing more than they should be, they're becoming something called more acidic. Okay, we have acids and we have bases of what things can be. If something becomes more acidic, it becomes more like acid-like, which is its chemical composition. If it becomes more acidic, the things that live in the ocean are not used to that. So unfortunately, if the ocean absorbs more CO2 and becomes more acidic, things can't survive in those conditions anymore. And it's affecting coral reefs because the things that live on or near the coral reefs are kind of leaving the coral reefs, and then the reefs are dying as a result. They call it coral bleaching. Other living organisms are either dying out or just leaving the areas if they can't adapt. And this increased CO2 is not a good thing. In the Northeast where we live, in the future, if things don't change, we can expect a lot more heat waves, higher temperatures, heavy rain. Precipitation is really affected by, you add more heat to the earth, rain is based on heat collecting and water vapor collecting. And we can expect, since we're near the ocean, sea level rise. Okay, the oceans are rising. So coastal places could have flooding and all kinds of results from those sea level rising. So I think that's basically the summary. I'm not expecting to remember all of this stuff, but I want you to understand that a good thing has been happening for a long time. When it gets out of whack, and by humans it's been getting out of whack, we have this planet warming and these climates and things changing. So that's the big picture of a greenhouse effect, basically, that has gone crazy. So I hopefully that helped you out, and we can again change this, but we all have to kind of change the way we live and act.